Man Talk, Leroy Marc on Trans Africa Radio.
He never once doubted the future success of his brand, and he's now sitting in studio with me. His name is Inga Gubeka with a G. Here's my hashtag Man Talk guest coming through all the way to 8 p.m. Central African time. News, views, reviews, and interviews and everything you've come to expect at this side of the equator. My name is Leroy Marc. I'm happy to be in the studio again. Last week, Inga, we was outside broadcasting, showing the people the faces, and people told me that I look better than I sound, which I don't know what that means. You know, maybe I sound really bad or I look really good, but I'll take it as it is. So welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Leroy.
So nice to have you in the studio. We had a great conversation off air, you and I, about the ways and means and Xhosa men. For more of that, you'd have to hang out with us all the way 7:30 Central African time to find out what that was all about. But you're here to talk about design, right? So, I mean, you are well decorated. You are Forbes top 30 under 30 to look out for. You're in the Nederland Guardian top 200 to check out for, with the likes of Alex Fitzgerald, who is a former clerk of the Constitutional Court, with Sani Faba, who is a producer. So it's a very good company you're in over there. And you come in with design. And design, you found interesting ways to use wood and to use leather and natural fabrics to create a range of things, from contemporary iPhone and iPad cases to backpacks and many other things. So let's go back a step, right? Right. Inga, a black man in South Africa wants to go and study design. Not a lawyer, not a doctor, not an engineer, not an accountant. Design. Why?
Oh, well, quite frankly, I've always known, from a very young age that I'm going to become a designer.
Mm-hmm.
There's no two ways about it, But also, I remember when I was, a child, having spent some time with my gran and raised by my gran in the Eastern Cape. When we're chatting, so Ntanami, what you want to become, Then I say I want to become a designer. And then my grand, like, what is that? But anyway.
Because also when we talk about design, we know about fashion design. Exactly. So that's the first design we come to, or maybe architecture. But no one actually thinks about like accessories and the like. We always think that you need to be a fashion designer. So it was even further away from the normal realms of an other.
Absolutely. So, that's where it all began. And then I remember I used to watch this show on Top Billing called DIY with Aidan Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wait a minute, what is it that those guys do exactly? Like, that's exactly what I want to become, I then moved to Durban to live with my grandfather there during my high school days. And then came.
I'm gonna just need you to tilt your mic down a bit so I can hear you better.
All right,
perfect.
So I then lived with my grandfather in Durban, and then I remember I was doing my matric, and I was still not sure, whether I should pursue this design and or not, but I was passionate about it. I knew I wanted to do it. And then from there, I took like a gap year just to try.
A gap year?
Yeah.
You know, for black kids, that doesn't work, eh? Like, we parents who say when take a gap year, they think you want to be unemployed for 12 months.
So I just took a gap year and just to gather my portfolio around, because I'd actually applied at DUT to study arts and design. And I just needed a portfolio, that proves that I can do some things, with my hands and so forth. So I spent like a quarter of that year just playing around with things and gathering my portfolio and so forth. And then I got accepted in DUT. Then I did my arts and design there, which was really great. It opened my eyes. But then I had headed with Durban, really.
Listen, Durban's a beautiful, beautiful city, but it is also quite small. It is, as far as the creative market, is not as big as Johannesburg.
Absolutely.
It is, yeah.
So I was like, Durban is not for me, and perhaps it's time for me to go to Cape Town. Then I spoke to my grandfather about it, and my grandmother like, Mtanam, just do whatever I want to do, and we just want you to graduate and just do this design thing of yours. And so I asked them, and then they allowed me. Then I went to Cape Town. Then that's where it all began.
It's so crazy that for Umakulu to allow you that latitude to go and study something that's not very mainstream, and to have that forward thinking. It's very rare to find it, at least from anyone born sort of north of 1988. We all want to catch the money, you want to all chase the dream. But so you get to Cape Town, you study, you do very well over there, and then you start Indalo, Deco, which you were the CEO for a while.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's go back to that then. Is that what naturally happens in design? Either you work for a big design studio or you go off on your own? Because I don't know of many places where you can go and say, that is what you do to get employed in design. It either seems you work for a major brand or you open a small boutique brand. Yeah,
well, in design, it gets very tricky. It's either you get swallowed by a very big, design house. Your Woolies, your Edcons, and whatever, and there are various departments, like in my case, I would have probably like worked in a retail design, for Woolies or whatever the case is, or Edcon Group or Mr. Price or whatever. But I did not, I chose not to. I then started Indaba Deco, which was a great opportunity for me because I always believe in doing cutting edge things, as opposed to doing things like that everyone has seen. So I remember then I started Indaba Deco as a furniture design studio initially. Yeah. But then it didn't make much sense business-wise because a person can only buy a piece of table once in 10 years.
It is an investment.
It's an investment, or a couch once in 10 years. And you already have like bigger players that are already established there, like that are generational for that matter, If you take a look at your Pierre Croniers, like your Heldin Martini, your guys from Choreographed, like it gets very tricky if you get into that space.
Yeah.
I then said to myself, you know what, I need to look into the accessories, bags, and so forth. And then I remember in Cape Town at that time there was a big trend of a movement rather, like of smaller studios getting into the leather goods space.
Yes.
In terms of bags, handcrafted bags, like that whole hipster sort of thing. I then said to myself, actually, this is very cool. This is such a cool idea. But I don't want to get into leather goods, just leather necessarily.
Yeah.
And then I thought of ideas, and I said to myself, why isn't there like wooden bags, but there's wooden watches, there's wooden glasses and so forth, And from there I wanted to investigate the reason why, because I could not understand, And when I looked online, well, there were just one or two people maybe like with wooden finishes, but not with the entire wood. So it was more leather and a little bit of wood. Touch.
Delicate sprinklings of.
Yes, exactly. Even if you look at Louis Vuitton, also they've done it. It's not a new thing. They've been doing the leather bags, but with a touch of wood.
Yeah.
If you look at,
I think even Gucci has wooden handles now.
Yeah,
in their tote bags.
They even have the wooden handles. And if you trace Louis Vuitton back then, when they were making like the travel trunks, they were made out of wood, actually, but covered with leather. But you won't see that it's actually wood. And I wanted something that you can see from miles away that is wood. So I started developing this product, give it a try to see what it's gonna look like. It looked like it worked at first, but now I needed to balance functionality with the aesthetics.
Because I'm thinking, for someone who is in transit and would need a bag that's made of wood, for instance, you're dealing with, firstly, the elements. If it rains, wood is,
Yeah.
Well, I'm not drawings, man.
So she was in shock because, like she couldn't understand what is this design. So to
just go through.
Mtanam, come on, like, you're not serious. Let's go in and go study something else. I'm not sure about what you're doing. But again, I'm really thankful, and grateful of the liberty that she gave me still, because when I was starting out, I didn't have money. She would give me money to pay rent in Cape Town, and Cape Town rent is not cheap.
Yeah, it is almost as bad as New York.
Yeah, it's really bad. So what I did is that I just took that money and used it to develop my products.
Okay.
And just went to go squat with my friends.
Oh, Makulu's money is going the wrong direction.
And then she'll send me like some allowance and all that kind of stuff, which was not much because I was already paying like quite a bit, like on rent and all that kind of stuff, and especially at the time I was supposed to be working already, and here I was still trying to do this entrepreneurship thing, design thing that nobody understands. And and my grandmother was limiting me now, like when it comes to cash, and allowance and all that kind of stuff.
Because you went to go draw, that's why.
Yes, I was having problems, and she was just, persisting, about me going back to school and study something else. And so it became really tough in Cape Town, a little bit. Because starting a business is not easy.
Yeah, I mean, being an entrepreneur, especially in a design space where, you know, you have to merge creativity and business, becomes quite a hard feat to do. Most people are good at one or the other and never both of them. So having to make money out of that. But let's go back. I mean, because you've had some good acclaim. I mean, you showed a design in Indaba. You are one of the, and we'll discuss this a bit later, one of the few people who has, actually the only person who has a single malt named after them. Yes, a whole single malt named after him. I believe he has some in his bag, doesn't he? No, he doesn't.
No, it's an 80,000 rands bottle, so I can't walk around with it.
I just thought that as a friend, you just bring it through to the studio just to at least showcase it to us. But I mean, for me, it's interesting because, you know, you start looking at the genesis of all these things, of you starting out and born in the Eastern Cape, then you travel the country, you start studying, you've got the support of family, you start developing this very niche accessory. The market, does it accept it? Does it say, yes, this is a great thing? Because unfortunately, as with concept cars and all other innovations, they end up being great ideas and end up just being that. Great ideas that never get received into the world. So did the market then grab onto this as beyond just, you know, being lauded for the design feat, for being a wonderful design product? Did it actually make it onto the streets and people accept it?
Okay, great. It actually did. So now I did my first debut actually at the Design Indaba. And it went very well. I mean,
that was 2014?
That was 2013.
Okay.
Yeah, 2013, yeah. It was well received, you know. I got like lots of buyers, you know, international buyers mostly. For some reason, like the locals were still it's nice. But
Hi puti.
yeah, what if it burns? You know, what if it rains? They'll ask all sort of questions there, you know. So I'll constantly have to explain, okay, this type of wood is being treated so that it prevents the wood from getting damaged. We use a glossy and matte finish, what is it called now?
A varnish.
No, it's not varnish. A silla, yeah. Wood silla, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot now, sorry. Wood silla. So, and you know, like with the locals, they're very skeptical about things that, you know, that they're foreign to them.
You know, and we're going to touch into this when we come back in the second segment, but I'm quite interested in that because, you know, we're talking also about like redefining Africa, especially through a creative sense, and we are the creativity hub of the world, right? I mean, all you need to do is look at the Maasai, you have to look at our people in Kenya, South Africans, you know, Africa is where things happen, from beadwork to cloths to fabrics. Everything comes from this continent. Then it gets recycled, got sent to the Europeans, goes to the Americans, and comes back at a premium.
Absolutely.
You know, ask me how much a nice diamond ring from Cartier costs, and then go down the road and see where it actually comes from, and it's a different story altogether.
Absolutely.
But is the continent ripe for more Ingas to come through? Is the continent ripe for design to become part of our lexicon and not just a fringe event that happens in Durban or wherever once or twice a year? Are we at the point, because I made the point earlier in conversation that, you know, in America, Silicon Valley wants you to be an innovator. You know, ideas get paid for at top dollar, whereas in Africa, it seems that we're very idea averse. We don't like a new thing. So why is it that the industry didn't take, the local industry at least, didn't lap up this product where the Europeans and Americans were running for it?
That's a very good question, actually. To answer that, I'll just create a very good scenario of what actually happened here. So I show at the Design Indaba. The market, the locals actually, like, they go crazy about it. Like, wow, we love it, you know. It's great. But it goes back to what you said, you know, like you can have like a great, you know, concept idea when it comes to a car, but is someone actually going to buy it?
Yes.
That's a different case altogether. Is it retail viable? That's a different story altogether. So after the Design Indaba, like, I got a lot of contacts when it comes to international buyers. I made headwaves, you know, international. I remember very well, you know, I started doing like even documentaries, you know, like on CNN and
CNN.
I was getting featured on Vogue Italia. I was getting featured on Elle Deco UK. I was just everywhere up in the international media, basically, you know. So now what happens now is that when people see all these things, then the locals, they go like, oh, wait a minute, there's something happening there. Then they started to grasp, you know. But I was right there in front of them, you know what I mean? And then people now starting to say, hey, where can we get these Indaba bags in South Africa and Yara? But I was just right here. can you open a shop in South Africa as well so that you can go buy these products? And
But
so forth.
only after someone else has lapped it up.
Exactly.
Which is crazy.
Exactly.
Talk to me about where you got this name, the Don.
The Don. It's actually my friends. So
You see how well we research here.
yeah, it looks like you did, eh? Looks like you did. So it's actually my friends, you know. So within my a group of friends, I've always been that guy like who just wants things to happen, you know, like
Yeah.
who is connected, who started the whole entrepreneurship thing, and I actually like I kind of influenced my other friends, you know, to actually get into this entrepreneurship thing, you know. And from then they called me like Inga, you are the Don, you know. And
Yes,
Inga
the Don.
You know, because I've always like been like a mover, you know what I mean, like knocking on the doors, you know, trying to make things happen, just trying to do something.
And I think part of being an entrepreneur is being sort of you know, that hustler, that innovator, that person who is like the mafia Don. You know, you come through, you take what's around you, you turn it around, and then you give it to the people.
Yeah.
You know, for a profit or for some legroom over there. When you come back, I want to talk about this whole idea of then moving from, you know, the initial phase and getting into Indaba law, and then, you know, because also you've dissolved Conundrum before you even started off with Indaba. So you are almost what we call a serial entrepreneur. You know, you touch, and you create wonderful things from those things. So I want to chat about that when you come back, and also then how we then start continentalizing the idea of design as a viable career choice, but more importantly, to start innovating on the design that we have already. Because if you look at things from like our instruments, from our you know, our textiles, there's so many things that are idiosyncratic to Africa that are actually marvels of innovation. Yet we sit down and we wait for, you know, America and Europe to tell us what's happening there. That is my hashtag man talk guest. His name is Inga the Don Gubeka. The Don.
The Don.
I'm calling him the Don for the rest of the interview. He's my hashtag man talk guest. He is. They call you a brand and design architect.
Yes.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
No. I want to have those business cards where I say, when I thought other people are like, wow. What is that? You know? Because it's quite an interesting title, and it also means that you speak to so many facets of this media industry apart from just design. Yeah. So my hashtag mentor guest, the Don in the studio, coming through now. Some royal coming through featuring Pacharan King. He is Eddie Kenzo.
This is Trans Africa Radio.
That there's lots of, you know, conversations. We have lots of Indaba. We have a lot of conferences and symposiums, and then the resolutions there are very niche. You know, the resolutions are implemented by a small sector of the industry, and we hope that we can do it again next year and next year. Design Indaba in particular is quite interesting for me because I've watched people like Asanda Sizani, who is a fashion director of Elle magazine and Destiny. And she was working there, and she is a very big design lover. But the idea of having various forms of design in one area, in one place. As a continent, are we doing enough? Considering that you have been lauded by Forbes as top 30, under 30 to look out for, Maiden Guardian's top 200 young individuals, including, players in industry, in fashion, in law, in jurisprudence, and all those areas. That, with your background, do you think that the continent is doing enough to shine the spotlight on design?
Quite frankly, I don't think so. I think, like you said earlier on, referencing with Silicon Valley, private and government, they inject quite a bit of money, into what Silicon Valley has become and what is known for. And I feel like if we can also do that, in Africa, our governments and the private sector, come together and then try and inject, some funds, like into the design industry, just to have it nurtured so that we can be able to produce things as great as Europe does, as great as Americans, So I feel like we need programs, Design Indaba alone is just not enough, they're doing their best, but it's just not enough. We need more than that, we need more funds pumped in the industry. For instance, after showcasing the Design Indaba, what then?
What happens?
Which
was my next question to you, because it's all good and well to have, a young entrepreneur like yourself who has immense talent showing at the Design Indaba. And we're not singling out the Design Indaba. It just happens to be the forefront of the design scene and sort of the catchphrase where everyone seems to migrate to showcase. But what happens? Now you've won, we get you in, you are a young entrepreneur in the space, the media world is raving about your product, you're on Trans Africa Radio with me. What happens then?
Well,
or rather, what ought to happen? What would you want to happen?
From there, like, I'd like to see, okay, first things first. I think also there's also something when I say money needs to be invested in design, the structure that's being set right now for a young designer to even showcase at the fashion week, you're not looking at paying anything less than 13,000.
Yeah.
You're not looking at paying anything less than 7,000 for the design Indaba, or 10,000 when they still had the expo.
Yeah.
So we need to nurture these designers to prepare them for these exhibitions and after the exhibition.
Yeah.
For instance, what then now they need to be retail ready, because it's pointless to have all the designers, designing, but being retail ready is an access to market is a different ball to game altogether. Yeah. You can design, yes, but retail readiness is a different thing altogether.
Is there will though from the retail stores to then take those things up? Because I find that with the plethora of designers around, where do we put them all in? Because let's say the Fashini group and Edcon all sweep up everyone at the design Indaba. It happens every year. The new entrance every year. Do we have enough space?
I don't think so, quite frankly. It's very tricky. First things first, like the big retail groups they're not even interested much in taking in South African products. Reason being the price points that to come in, they're a bit high, but also like for the niche market, number one. And whereas they can bring in things from China that are fast fashion, that are coming in at a very cheaper price. So it gets very tricky, for young designers in all sorts of ways, and part of this investment that I think that should be considered is to then get these designers retail ready. For instance, I like what has been happening in Cape Town, which I was part of at the V&A waterfront.
Yeah. And your first store was in Cape Town.
Yes, it was in Cape Town, which is the shed, whereby like a huge investment went in to get all the good designers that were curated, to get like really nice shops there. I think that's a good initiative. If we can have like quite a bit and more of those, for instance, in Gateway, for instance, in Sandton, for instance, in all the big malls, basically. Because when I speak of retail readiness, I don't necessarily speak of like boutique level, because in a boutique level, you can only move so much goods. But if you're in a mall, you're talking like good foot traffic, you're talking a good exposure. We talk a lot of things that can grow South African brands to be great,
Yeah.
And in this case, even the biggest designers that ought to be in this country, they're not even retail ready.
Yeah.
Which is it's concerning. It's just concerning. Like even themselves are not big. So a lot of money needs to be pumped in. Like into this sort of stuff. In South Africa, even the biggest designers probably can't afford even to have like R1 million up front. Like to have a store in Sandton.
Yeah.
And from there, like they still need to pay about 200,000 rands rent in a mall in Sandton. So it's things like that. So
which is quite crazy, because I mean, what you're highlighting right now is the fact that the barriers to entry are not just only in the design industry. So you're not only dealing with the fact that you have to be good at what you do and be able to have an innovation that is receivable by the people, but there's other barriers to entry in the industry, like for instance the ridiculous price of rental in the country. For you to get square meterage in a store that can afford your price points, for instance, like Sandton, the Diamond Walk is littered with things like Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, Prada, all of those, because they have international backing. They've got investors who sit offshore who can pump money into this, and for them this is a very big PR exercise even. And then the question then begs to be asked: when we talk to you about your friends just across the border, right now we were in the last day of Windhoek Fashion Week. It's the second one. We had Louis Manana, who's one of the founders in the seat that you're sitting in last week, and he was talking to us about the fact that people are coming into the country now to Namibia to take over and want to be part of this thing. And I said to him that, do you realize that from a fashion perspective, and I've made this point 1,000 times on the station, that if the design industry and the fashion industry alone, right, was insulated, we would be able to hire every unemployed person.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So how about the conversation between you and your counterparts in Nigeria, in Kenya, within the continent, to start the conversation, to make it at the very least a conversation between in the continent?
So my opinion with this, is very simple. Just to second what you're saying. Let's take the government in South Africa. They preach industrialization and all the kind of stuff, but nothing much is happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and when people think of fashion, and design, they think that it's small stuff, like it's creative things. No.
Frivolous things. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not that. If you trace it back in the days, when all the big brands like your Fabianis used to manufacture in South Africa, your Woolies, everybody, a lot of people were employed. Like in CMTs, manufacturing, leather in Pietermaritzburg, all the CMTs in Cape Town, all the CMTs in Joburg, people were employed. And now when things started moving to China, like the manufacturing moved to China, and all those people were left unemployed. So what I'm trying to say to you is that with the investment that it can be put in design, because after design, following that is manufacturing, which means now we're opening another door for employment, which is industrialization. Which means after industrialization, there's now a textile industry that's also opening up. There's a lot of things that now are industries that are opening up just from one door.
Yeah.
So I believe that it must be taken really seriously. It's a very critical thing that an investment is highly needed, to pump into.
Is there a support network for you then from those stakeholders, just as designers? I mean, even if you're not opening up the industry then, as it were, the government, is there places for you to go, Inga, who, Umakulu has invested all this money in it, and now you have to go out there and make it to yourself for yourself. Unfortunate thing is that, being an entrepreneur is very expensive. The first year you're gonna lose more money than you're gonna make, and then you hope that you break even at some point in the second and third year. Is there any not protection, but is there any way that you can get supported? Because how did you start? How did you get your first store up, and now you've got you open in Braam as well? The second store that you open in Braam. Those need money. Those need a market. Those need rental. Those need staff. The UIF. What did you do for you to get around those issues of financing, for instance, that clearly are not available?
Yeah, quite frankly, for me, it was I built from the little that I had. That's why I always say to entrepreneurs, when you make money as an entrepreneurship is not about making lots of money and buy a Porsche or buy whatever car that is expensive. It's a journey. It's the way of life. You put back to grow.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. So I made some money, put back to develop further. And up until I was in the point whereby now, okay, great. Now my books are looking good. They're audited. Everything is fine. SARS compliant and everything. Then I got approached by a couple of investors. But just because they were throwing money like in figures, I wasn't moved by that.
Because you already made your own money, so you weren't, the shine of the money wasn't so important to you.
And also like the ethos of my a business and myself as a person, money doesn't move me.
Yeah.
I've had money. It doesn't move me at all. So I've got an approach, by a couple of investors, from Joburg actually. And I also believe that, investment is not about someone putting in money. That's not enough. There needs to be synergy when you are going into an investment with an investor.
Yeah.
It can't be just about money. Otherwise, you'll be taken for a ride. A lot can go wrong because there's no synergy. There's no a connection, between, you don't stand for the same thing. Now, you don't want to be in a situation whereby you've got an investor that wants to put money and starve you creatively and just box you and you can't move. You've got the money, but you can't move. That's the worst thing that can happen to you.
And it stifles the creativity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It cripples you completely.
Yeah.
You're miserable and because you just went for the chase of the money, someone bringing in the money to your business, and you thought, I'm in, So it's very important that, you don't do that. So anyway, I got up, and then I found, the investor that could invest in my business, that we're getting along with, with really good things going, together, And that's how we built from there as well. You know, at Indaba Deco, we moved up, you know, and you know.
Yeah.
And but now Indaba Deco is actually involved. When I resigned, we had just signed a deal with the services sitter.
Okay.
To do like trainings in the township and empower people in the townships and so forth.
Which is something I wanted to talk to you about right after, to say, you know, now that you've created this very interesting skill set that you've got, the rubric, as it were, the memo, the answer to the questions, then what do we do to start, you know, reinvesting it? Because importantly enough, you know, we hear stories about Jay-Z and how he made his money and how he has a foundation. But for me, it has to happen in a micro scale as well. It has to happen with, you know, Inga, who's made this thing work, you know, with Omakulu coming in, and, you know, you don't come from tons of money. You had to work your way through. What do we do to then, you know, replicate this again, to make sure that there's a place for a Leroy who's seeing Inga and going, man, that guy is doing what I want to do. How can I make a living from it?
I think in this case it's very simple. You know, going back to what you're saying, which is, you know, you're touching on some very important points here. I think as entrepreneurs, you know, I don't believe you need to be a multimillionaire to give back. You can give back the little that you do.
Absolutely.
You know, like in this case, you know, I take on like little consultations, you know, like people, hey Inga, can I meet up with you, inboxing me?
Yeah.
I need an advice on this design concept that I have, that I give them my direction, you know what I mean? And having been there, developed something, you know? Okay, great. But sometimes I'm very brutally frank, you know, like I'm brutal. Yes, okay, great. Now you want to do this. Why don't you do it like that? This won't work. I can assure you right for free. That won't work.
I can tell you for free.
Yeah, this, you can try do it like that and that and that. Maybe that can work. Because again, people like, there's a difference between trying to be different, but there's also a difference between trying to be different with making something that's going to be sellable.
Yeah. Because you still have to have some commercial viability.
Exactly. You need commercial viability in anything that you do, unfortunately, you know. Just because you can just create heels that are made out of wood or wooden heels or whatever, doesn't mean that people like that. Yes, it's different, it's new. It might appear cool, but it doesn't mean people like that.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, for instance, it's basic things, you know, like that people need to grasp, you know, like not everything that looks cool and different and new can work.
And it's also the idea of reining in the creativity, you know, making sure that you go as far as you can, but also bring it back so that it's usable and workable. Talking about things that are workable, you've been very busy, right? So early on in the start of the interview, we're talking about how you have a single malt named after you, an 80,000 Rand bottle, he says. 80,000 Rand bottle of single malt. Do you have two at your house? 3, 4. Don't tell me, because people come to your house and start breaking it. you know how they are. You know how they are, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about this though, because for me it's very interesting that, you know, apart from the journey that you've had, which is incredible to behold, you have surely put yourself on a track that is working for you. The Mail and Guardian believes so. At least you and 199 other people are smart enough to be in that group. Forbes thinks that 29 others plus you are good enough to look out for at under 30. And also Glenfiddich bestowing you with this honor, where, I mean, we've had actors of screen and stage, we've had, you know, very smart people with Nobel Peace Prizes who don't have an 80,000 Rand bottle of single malt named after them. What did you do when you look back onto the story and you go, Yazu Inga, that's where the moment, the turning point was, as it were. What was it for you? Because I tell you why I asked the question. We all know the now. We see you now having these and many others pinned against your name at the 28, going on 29. But we don't know what the turning point was. What happened to get you to this point?
With the Glenfiddich campaign, you know, so Glenfiddich team, they identified people.
You.
Yeah, actually, they identified 3 people initially, you know, as part of the campaign that had the pioneering spirit, you know, like that is compared to William Grant, who is the founder of Glenfiddich, you know, and the master craftsman of Glenfiddich back then. Because he believed in doing things differently and so forth. So we ran a campaign, like it was about 3 of us, you know, like in different industries, you know. There was a top chef, there was, he's actually a celebrity chef, there was another guy that's a media guru, you know, that also does things like very differently, you know. That was also with me on the campaign. And there was some sort of like a voting process, you know, like within the audience and the judges, like to see like which one
like these really, very interesting people.
Yes, really stands for what Glenfiddich is, and can be associated with the brand Glenfiddich, and can also be compared to the pioneering spirit, of Glenfiddich.
Yeah.
And I came best, out of the three people, and they said this is our guy right here.
Yeah.
So that's how I became it's called the Maverick, Glenfiddich Maverick. And then from there, and part of the perks, of being a Maverick was to have your own bottle crafted by yourself, like the contents inside. For instance, my bottle was made from a bottle that was a little bit over 200 and something years old, that hasn't been used since.
And it is a very good looking bottle.
Yes, thank you.
Very good looking. It is, so just to describe it, it has what is a very pale cork at the top, and has a white band at the bottom, and a white band at the top. So you'll see that if you have 80 big ones to spend.
So that's how it happened, and they actually we actually did. I mixed the actual contents,
Oh, yourself?
Yeah, myself. So they brought someone who's an expert, like in whiskey from Glenfiddich, and we mixed, the actual notes and everything that I wanted within the actual bottle, and it was made from scratch because it doesn't exist.
They call it the Glenfiddich Indalo.
That's right.
80,000 rand. Now, just to wrap it up, I mean, I'm very interested in development, especially with black males in the country, right? Especially on the continent. What do you think is the one stumbling block for black men just like you and I in reaching their true potential? You are surely on your path over there. Having had a CEO-ship under your name, being a multi-disciplinary entrepreneur, having a bottle of very expensive liquor in your name. What is the stumbling block that stops us men, black men in particular, from getting to the places that we want to be, whether it's in the Inga track of life or in the Matota Kuzwa or whoever it is? What is that stumbling block that's keeping us down?
The stumbling blocks that keeps us down as men, I think number one is that we have a lot of distractions.
Yeah,
I think we tend to worry more about things that don't really matter, really. Like things like popping bottles and all the kind of stuff, like how you define your success is being in a club there, being seen there with girls and popping bottles, or being seen in a particular place, like living their life, you know what I mean? And I don't think that's the way to go. But people have different preferences, however. But I think that's less important. There's really pressing issues, such as mastering your craft, redefining what you really stand for, whether you incorporate, whether you've got a good job, or whatever path that you are as a man, that wants to succeed. Focus on that. Don't worry about really the things that don't really matter. Those things will all come, but they don't really matter at the moment.
Stay away from the distractions.
It's merely distractions, and that's all. And in my case, as an entrepreneur, like. I've seen a lot of people, just because they've got like a few projects happening here and there, and now they upscale and upgrade their life.
Yeah.
It's all good to upgrade, but keep your costs very low, because you may never know where the rainy days are.
Yeah.
And in my case recently, actually, I went through a very, very rough patch.
Yeah.
I resigned. I fall out with my partners at Indaba. And I resigned as a CEO. I resigned. I left.
Yeah.
And I didn't have money because I didn't seed my shares. I didn't sell my shares. I seeded them.
Okay.
Rather. Yeah. And I was thinking, okay. Luckily, what I've got going is that I'm a good designer. So I said to myself, I can only start something new.
Yeah.
Then I started Inga Atelier, and it's only been a month, and it's going so well. What I'm trying to say is that once you know your way, you won't get lost finding it again.
Yes.
Whatever
stumbling blocks can.
Whatever stumbling blocks you have, you won't find it difficult to overcome them, because once you've traveled the journey, you now learn the shortcuts. Easier routes to get to a certain place. Okay, that's danger there. I'm going that way. You fully understand because you've walked that road before.
Yeah, you've been there before. Yeah,
you've been there before, exactly. So but I always manage to bounce back, you know,
land on your feet,
in these sort of things. You know, it's all about finding your path again and just get on the rail again and keep going, you know.
Talking about being on the rail, what's happening next? Where can we find you? Where can we see you? What's the next plan going on? You said now you've just got
Inga Atilia.
Inga Atilia. You know, what's next? What is coming up for Inga?
So what I did is that I launched Inga Atilia at the Sanlam Handmade Contemporary the earlier last month.
Yeah.
Which was a great success, by the way. And then from there, I had like a lot of response, you know, like even, you know, media like interested in the new stuff that I'm doing now, you know. And we just recently launched the online store. There's a possibility actually of having a very nice corner kiosk in one of the premium malls here in Joburg. So the pipeline is going to be finalized next week.
Look out for that.
yeah. And this is all like in a space of less than 2 months, you know.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is that it is much more easier, you know, like to bounce back, you know, like because I've traveled this road. So basically what took me more than 3 years
to build,
now I'm just doing it in less than 2 months.
Exactly, like in 8 weeks you've gotten back there.
I've gotten back there.
And I think your point is right. I think the quote for me of today is, you know, once you've worked out what your path is, you won't get distracted.
This is Trans Africa Radio.